Test, test, 1, 2.
Check. Check, 1, 2. Check, check. Check, 1, 2. Check.
See, it's so weird now. When I flick it off, it gives me POL, and it stays on. Position. Someone's a little,
No kidding.
little uptight about it. Like, so you're advocating for the shooting death of a hockey player simply because he does not play on your team? Really weird. Like, is the defending Norris Trophy winner. So there's several hockey experts that are against your opinion.
What?
But yeah, it's weird that.
And hold both down at the same time.
Good morning, everybody. Want to welcome everybody back from the March break. Happy spring, yeah, right? So we're going to start this morning with our regular agenda. So the first item on the agenda are the confirmation of minutes of the 29th of February, of the 18th of February 2014, minutes number 29. Are those minutes carried? Carried, thank you. Just to let you know, we have one regret today. Councillor Moffat won't be here. Item number 1, World Water Day proclamation. I'm going to hold that item for a proclamation, and I'm going to ask our awesome manager of our drinking water services, Tammy Rose, to come up and accept the proclamation on behalf of all staff that work in water. Item number 2, Quarterly Performance Report Q3, July 1st to September 30th, 2013. Is that item received? Received? Thank you. Item number 3, Water Environment Strategy Phase 1. I'm going to hold that item for a presentation. And so if you bear with me, I'm going to go down to the podium and I'm going to ask Tammy Rose to meet me up at the podium, please. So good morning, everybody. I'd like to take a moment before we start our meeting to acknowledge an important day that took place over the weekend. As some of you may know, World Water Day was this Saturday, March the 22nd, and that day our mayor proclaimed World Water Day in Ottawa. So on behalf of our mayor, I would now like to read a proclamation. I'm going to ask Tammy Rose if she would accept this proclamation and bring it back to our Britannia plant. And thank all of our staff that we work with. Certainly we know we have the best water in North America, and when Alexandra Cousteau was here visiting in the fall, she was certainly very positive about how Ottawa is dealing with its water resources. So on behalf of all of us on council in the city, we're very grateful, Tammy. So on behalf of the mayor. Whereas International World Water Day is held annually on March 22nd to highlight the need for sustainable management of freshwater systems, and whereas water is our most valuable natural resource, and whereas our waterways are deeply rooted in the culture and history of the nation's capital, whereas the City of Ottawa has over 4,500 kilometers of streams and rivers, and whereas these waterways are essential to the health of our community, environment, and economy, and whereas we are the stewards of the water environment upon which future generations depend, and whereas each citizen is called upon to help protect our waterways and to practice water conservation, therefore Mayor Jim Watson, Mayor of the City of Ottawa, did hereby proclaim March the 22nd, 2014 as World Water Day in the City of Ottawa. So Tammy, I'd like to present this proclamation to you, and again on behalf of all of us, thank you for a job extremely well done. I think post-Walkerton, most Ontarians, if not Canadians, are much more aware of the importance of looking after our drinking water systems, but we know that that's just a small microcosm of the bigger picture that we have to look after. So you deliver us the straight A's all the time, so we're very grateful for that. And to our Deputy City Manager, again, on behalf of this committee, we're very grateful to the good work of your staff. So Steve, thank you very much as well. So before we begin this morning, are there any declarations of interest? Okay, seeing none. Again, I want to thank our drinking water staff for collecting our proclamation this morning. So as we know, one of the top priorities for this committee to continue fulfilling our term of council priorities is to continue to work on the health of our water systems. Our streams, our rivers, and natural areas are significant assets for the city, and as members of the Environment Committee, we have a duty to protect them. And as I mentioned earlier this morning, there are over 4,500 kilometers of rivers, streams, creeks, and other watercourses in Ottawa. And overall, when we examine these watercourses, they're in fairly good condition, and we know that protecting our natural assets is paramount. In 2010, Council approved the Ottawa River Action Plan, which includes a suite of 17 important projects. And to date, more than $140 million has been committed or spent on these initiatives. One area, as we spoke about last month, where significant progress has been made, is the focus that we have on reducing our combined overflows, specifically through our real-time controls products. When staff presented us with an update on ORAP at our last Environment Committee meeting, we learned that last year saw the absolute lowest discharge of combined sewage overflow on record, and we know that since 2006, our CSO volumes have been reduced by a staggering 80%. We also accelerated the spending plan for sewer separation projects to align with the Accelerated Ottawa on the Move program, and as a result, ORAP's spending plan was increased from $47 million to $88 million. We also received an update about the environmental assessment for the combined sewage storage tunnel, and we know that this project is going to practically eliminate all combined sewer overflows which flow into the Ottawa River. This term of council, strategic priority with regards to environmental stewardship is being met. So when you look at the term of council priorities, which were approved by unanimous council in July of 2011, we are on track to checking off all the boxes in that list. We have made a commitment to promote long-term sustainability and to reduce our environmental footprint by maintaining and improving the quality of water, by protecting our natural resources, and also protecting the land that will enhance the quality of our environment for our residents. We're developing stormwater management facility retrofits for various watersheds in our city, and we know that this program will better manage stormwater runoff quality and quantity, especially in the older areas of Ottawa that were developed without stormwater management facilities, or those facilities that already exist but need to be updated. Implementation of the West End Flood Investigation Action Plan is underway, and when you look back, we've invested $34 million to protect residents from the risk of flooding in the West End. In 2013, the city completed improvements to various municipal drains, including in Rito Goulburn Ward, the Dowdle Municipal Drain. Construction is currently underway on the David Adams Municipal Drain, which will reduce flooding in agriculture areas. And when you look in our rural areas, in 2013 alone, we completed maintenance and repair on 45 municipal drains, totaling 34 kilometers in length. We've also enacted several substantial amendments to the city's water bylaw, bringing us up to speed with regulatory systems in comparable Ontario municipalities. And we know that as a result of all the investments that this council has made, that we are now leading, not just in the province, but in the country, and I would argue in North America, when it comes to protecting our water assets. But we also know that much more needs to be done. And the water strategy, and water environment strategy, is going to help us take those next steps. This strategy is the 13th initiative of the Ottawa River Action Plan. As we know, in Ottawa, our water environment resources are managed by 3 levels of government: municipal, provincial, and federal, as well as conservation authorities. And when you look at the magnificent Ottawa River, we also share a border with the province of Quebec. So while the corporation of the City of Ottawa can only control within our jurisdiction, we know that we can work with other levels of government, with our residents and other agencies to influence what happens to watercourses as they flow through either private or public property. Given the jurisdictional complexity, it's important for the City of Ottawa to have a roadmap that can not only guide the city's actions, but also our investments, so we can target areas of specific concern. The health of Ottawa's streams and river is a clear priority for the city, and I look forward to hearing about our water environment strategy today. As you know, this is phase one of a two-phase strategy. And phase one is going to allow us to get our house in order so that the City of Ottawa can find out what's within our jurisdiction, what the various departments are doing together. And it's our hope, by understanding our own governance and also looking at the work that the other levels of government are doing, including our neighbour and the province of Quebec, that we're actually going to maximize the best use of these resources. And we know from a governance perspective that the City of Ottawa can't simply ask other levels of government what to do and expect them to do it if we're not working together. So without sounding like Serge, I think we need to tap in to what other agencies are doing and leverage our assets. And what you're going to hear today is that we want our staff to start seeing water as a soft asset. So in the same way that we look after our hard assets like roads, community centers, libraries, those sorts of things, we want water to be managed in the same fashion. And finally, before I welcome our General Manager of Environmental Services to provide us with a presentation, I want to acknowledge last month, Councillor Moffat and I had the opportunity to go speak to Council's chosen Environmental Advisory Committee. So these are specific residents who have been selected to provide environmental advice to the city through our process. And what an incredible conversation we had that night with that advisory committee. We were there for close to 2 hours speaking about phase one and phase two of the water environment strategy, and certainly heard some very good advice from our partners, including strengthening some of the language in our document with respect to working on the Ottawa River with the province of Quebec, and certainly want to acknowledge the good work that that advisory committee is doing. Appreciate the fact they provided us with a motion at the end of that meeting acknowledging their support of this way of dealing with our water environment strategy, and certainly acknowledge the fact that they've asked us to come back and welcomed us to actually go back and continue the dialogue. And we expect our advisory committee to play a significant role in the upcoming water roundtable that we're going to host. And again, I want to thank staff that night who came with us, because again, as you know from the document about phase one of the water strategy, that more than one city department is involved with delivering this very important service, looking after, again, I want to underscore what I think is the most precious asset on this entire planet. So without further delay, I'd now like to welcome Dixon Weir, the General Manager of Environmental Services, who's going to lead us in our discussion and provide us with an excellent presentation with a roadmap of where we're about to go. So welcome, Mr. Weir, and I'd also like to welcome our Deputy City Manager, Steve Kanalakis, this morning as well. So thank you, gentlemen. Dixon.
Thank you, Chair. And I've got a presentation, as you've mentioned. You've made a very, very strong introduction, and I think this presentation will add to that discussion that you've already started. Just to set some context, if I can, our streams, rivers, and natural areas are very significant assets for the city. Just ask any visitor or any resident, and this is one of the earmarks of the City of Ottawa. There are over 4,500 kilometers, in fact, of rivers, streams, creeks, and other watercourses, and that includes some 1,200 kilometers of municipal drains and many sub-watersheds. Overall, our rivers and streams are in fairly good condition, and residents have made it very clear that they want the city to do its utmost to protect our water resources. The city has proposing herein to adopt an asset management approach to its hard infrastructure, such as water mains and sewers, and we're suggesting that we apply that same approach to these natural assets, to our creeks, streams, and rivers, because this is an important methodology in order to ensure that we're accomplishing what our residents are asking, and that's to protect these assets. Where are these watercourses? The location of our streams and rivers shows the complexity of managing and protecting our water resources. A watershed approach recognizes that we all live downstream and underscores the importance of working together. While the city can only control what is within its jurisdiction, we can work with residents and other agencies to influence what happens to watercourses as they flow through private or other public property. The map shows the full extent of our watersheds. As you can see, and this is quite clear, over 75% of that area is outside the city's boundaries. And we work within 3 different conservation authorities, those being the Mississippi Valley Conservation, shown in light purple, the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, shown in the central in the blue, and the South Nation River Conservation in yellow. Why protect watersheds? Well, healthy watersheds provide critical services that support the health and well-being of the people, of our community, and of the environment. And as you can see here, we've outlined just some of the key aspects of those impacts on our watersheds. Obviously, we're protecting Ottawa's drinking water sources, as the Chair has already pointed out. We're maintaining healthy ecosystems. We're protecting people and property from flooding. We're supporting our agricultural and tourism businesses, and we're providing great areas for recreational activities and safe beaches. But we have to understand that that's done in the context of some threats. Well, again, while overall our streams and rivers are in fairly good condition, Ottawa's watersheds face a series of threats that are well known and are common to most municipalities. Not surprisingly, those being excess nutrients and bacteria and contaminants, altered streams, shoreline degradation, stresses on our smaller tributaries, and fragmentation of natural areas, and finally, extreme weather events. These threats and these conditions have to be understood within a very complex watershed governance structure. Ottawa's water environment resources are managed by all three levels of government, as well as conservation authorities. The Water Environment Strategy Phase 1 helps to understand the mandates, roles, and responsibilities of the many different agencies and oversight groups. If we were to look first at federal agencies, there are a number of different federal agencies that play different roles. Environment Canada, Transport Canada, and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans each have an important regulatory role. Parks Canada manages water on federal lands, such as the Rideau Canal. And the National Capital Commission is a significant landowner in Ottawa, and its responsibilities include managing the Greenbelt. If we look now to provincial agencies, several provincial agencies are also involved. Provincial agencies have legislative and policy jurisdiction in the areas of drinking water protection, water supply, natural heritage protection, agriculture, and municipal planning, and lead a number of programs that support provincial policy in each of these areas. While Phase 1 focused on the roles and responsibilities of agencies operating on the Ontario side of the river, it is also important to acknowledge that responsibility for the largest watercourse in the region, that being the Ottawa River, is shared with Quebec. It is important that we understand and work with governments and agencies on the Quebec side of the river, including the Ville de Gatineau, to ensure effective stewardship of our shared water resources. A further engagement with these agencies will be done as part of the Phase 2 report. Within the City of Ottawa, there are various internal departments that are involved in the protection and management of Ottawa's water environment resources. Within environmental services, of course, we're dealing with drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater collection and treatment, the maintenance of our streams and municipal drains, and importantly, stream monitoring and protection. Within infrastructure services, their role extends to include design and construction of steam restoration projects and the wet weather infrastructure master plan. Planning and growth management, well, they're involved with land use planning, planning and policy related to sub-watersheds, stormwater, groundwater, and source water, and natural heritage systems, and finally, development review. Each of these areas has an important impact on these sub-watersheds. And public works, well, they're involved in tree planting, especially along shorelines, adopting pollution prevention practices when maintaining streets, sidewalks, beaches, and parks. And finally, REPDO, or the Real Estate Property Development Group, has the city's responsibility for land ownership, protection, acquisition, and disposal. So all of these groups have a very important role to play in ensuring that we provide an integrated approach to this area of responsibility. Conservation authorities have a provincially mandated responsibility to manage and protect water environment resources as per the Conservation Authorities Act. They regulate development that might affect watercourses, fish habitat, wetlands, and hazardous lands, and engage in watershed planning and monitoring. They manage conservation authorities and undertake programs to educate residents and promote environmental stewardship. Due to its size and geography, as we mentioned previously, the City of Ottawa works with 3 conservation authorities representing the 3 watershed areas. And as part of that, the City has several representatives on each of the Conservation Authority boards who sit along representatives from other smaller municipalities and interested parties in the watershed. The operating costs of the conservation authorities are funded through a municipal property tax levy. The City of Ottawa's share of the levy is determined primarily on the basis of the City's assessment relative to the total assessment within the watershed. And the City's total share last year amounted to just under $10 million. One of the most impressive initiatives that the City has undertaken in this term involves the Ottawa River Action Plan. And as has been mentioned previously, over $142 million of investment has been made in 17 different projects, and these are all intended to focus on 4 areas of improvement, those being reducing combined sewage overflows, reducing stormwater impacts, improving wastewater treatment, and measuring and monitoring our performance. And a recent report back to Environment Committee in February of this year provides a very detailed update on the progress of this important initiative. And as a sense to give you an idea of how significant some of those improvements have been, I'll share with you this combined sewage overflow volumes, which, as the Chair has already touched on, indicates just how profound and how significant our improvement in overall collection of the combined sewage overflow has been. Last year, 2013, saw the lowest discharge of combined sewage on record at approximately 203,000 cubic meters. And on a percentage basis, CSO volumes have been reduced by over 80% between 2006 and 2013. As you can see, in the last 3 years, with the full implementation of the real-time control program, our levels of CSO capture is now stabilizing. And when we compare this performance to that of other municipalities across the province, certainly this puts Ottawa very firmly in the lead. Returning now to the Water Environment Strategy, the Water Environment Strategy is one of the citywide initiatives of the Ottawa River Action Plan. And this strategy is being undertaken in 2 phases as proposed here. First, this is part of the first phase of this initiative, and phase 2 will take place in the period 2015 to 2018. In terms of the benefits of a water environment strategy, there are many. Given the jurisdictional complexity, having a roadmap can guide the city's actions and investments. Having clear goals can assist the city, the agencies, and our stakeholders in achieving these goals. And with a strategy, actions can be targeted towards specific issues and concerns. And I think it's important that we recognize that the development of this water environment strategy builds on a number of very important Ottawa accomplishments. The health of Ottawa's streams and rivers is and has been a clear priority for the city. As previously mentioned, ORAP is a multi-year, multi-million-dollar investment to protect the quality of the Ottawa River. But we have many other programs and services that similarly protect and restore the health of numerous streams and rivers that flow through the city. For example, our stormwater management retrofit plans in Pinecrest Creek and the eastern subwatersheds identify ways to manage harmful stormwater runoff in older areas of the city. And our source water protection plans are joint efforts with the province, the local conservation authorities, and other stakeholders to protect municipal drinking water sources. The city's Water Environment Protection Program is a comprehensive program to monitor the health of our streams and our rivers. And the city works with a diverse group of agencies and residents to undertake various environmental stewardship initiatives such as the Rural Clean Water Grants Program, tree planting, shoreline cleanup, and cleaning the capital. All of these have an important and positive impact on protecting our rivers, streams, and creeks. In terms of a go-forward approach, this water environment strategy is being developed in 2 phases. Phase 1 provides a comprehensive overview of Ottawa's water environment, the geography, and the jurisdictional complexities. It sets out the city's approach and actions for the next year, including city departments adopting an integrated asset management approach to apply to natural infrastructure within the City of Ottawa. City staff engaging with government agencies, including the Ville de Gatineau and various Quebec agencies and conservation authorities, to better understand and determine their action plans and the focus for the next 5 years in order to better inform the city's own actions. And as part of that, the Chair and the Vice Chair of the Environment Committee are hosting a water roundtable that will engage with residents on a variety of issues affecting the water environment. And as part of our ongoing actions, the city departments are working together to implement a broad scope of 2014 works that will all be undertaken within current budget authorities and priorities in order to protect and improve the water environment. Phase 2 will come forward with the new term of council in 2015 and will include a strategic framework and a longer-term action plan along with recommended investments to support those longer-term actions. I would like to highlight some of the work that's already undergoing and that will be completed in 2014, and that you can see some of those here. There are also a detailed list is provided within the report, but we are going through a number of sub-watershed plans and identifying outstanding actions. We're continuing to support the Rural Clean Water Program. We are reviewing and revising our sub-watershed planning. We have 2 initiatives this year that will allow us to implement and learn from our green infrastructure, those along Sunnyside Street and Stewart Street. We're continuing to update using the best technology and the most modern technology, our floodplain mapping, and we are continuing to coordinate with a number of agencies, including all of the various conservation authorities. So these are some of the highlights that we are continuing to implement this year, all with a intent to protect and improve our water environment. I would like to mention, and the Chair has already mentioned, but this water environment strategy has been presented to the Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee on March 6th. Although I was unable to attend, I do understand that an excellent discussion was held with Chair McRae and Vice Chair Moffat and members of the Advisory Committee. Their input is included along with this report as document number 3. Where possible, this report that you're receiving here today has been adjusted to reflect their important input, and other longer-term actions will be included as part of the Phase 2 works. And with that, I bring my presentation to a close.
Thank you very much, Mr. Weir. I appreciate that flow of information this morning. So before we go to questions to staff, I'm going to ask for a mic for Councillor Chernushenko. I was hoping that Councillor Chernushenko would move a motion for me this morning. The Environmental Advisory Committee, as I mentioned earlier, had moved a motion that received unanimous approval at their committee. We've asked it to be enshrined not only in this document formally, so that it goes forward for people to read it and also as part of our record, but I'm also hoping that committee will consider approving this motion in terms of enshrining it as part of what we're doing here today. So we'll put the motion on the table early on, and then we'll vote on it at the end of the presentations and the questions to staff. So Councillor Chernushenko, to move the motion, please.
Thanks very much. I'll be moving this on behalf of the Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee. Whereas, given the importance of water to the city and the region, therefore be it resolved that the Environment Stewardship Advisory Committee supports the principles outlined in the March 6, 2014 presentation of the Water Environment Strategy, and be it further resolved that ESAC, acronym, moves that the Environment Committee and staff consider the following points in the development of the Water Environment Strategy. 1, some form of ongoing consultation in the development of the Water Environment Strategy. 2, metrics be developed to monitor the progress of the strategy. 3, the Ottawa River be expressly included in the strategy, including consultation with Quebec partners. 4, water usage and demand management, including conservation and water rate structure, be considered. 5, a climate change lens be included. For example, changes in weather, precipitation, extreme weather events, heat island effects, and the overall climate change impacts and adaptation. 6, recognition of impacts of new infrastructure, for example, roads, paved surfaces, public and private infrastructure, and the need to mitigate their impacts on the watershed. And 7, that staff come back to ESAC to present the results of the roundtable and progress on the work plan.
So thank you very much, Councillor. And when the time comes, we can vote on that motion. So now we're going to questions to staff, and the first person who wasn't, Councillor Clark.
I just would like to get a hard copy of that last motion,
Okay. No problem.
because I think there's some reason to debate it.
Sure. Okay, so we'll get that. It's arriving as we
Thank you.
speak. So, Councillor, did you have any questions to staff about the water strategy? Councillor Clark? You do have the floor.
Okay. I guess my concern is this is kind of a mammoth undertaking, and you're taking it in small chunks. I'd like to know what chunk, other than the continuation of ORAP, is on your agenda for this year.
It was on the slideshow. So we'll ask staff if they can pull the slideshow up as well, and I'll ask Mr. Weir. Councillor Clark, you came in at the tail end. Did you get the slide deck? No, there's a slide deck as well, that they went through their work plan. Okay, so we'll pull up that, and we'll also ask Mr. Weir to address that as well, please.
So, Chair, through you to the councillor, included with this report and on this slide are the activities that we will continue with in 2014. These are initiatives that are already underway in some instances and can be carried out within our current work plans for 2014. In addition to this, the other important element that I would like to highlight is the hosting of a water roundtable this spring, early summer, and that will provide an important input into the development of the 2015-2018 plan and strategy.
Well, when you say things like, I'll pick one of them, most of them are ongoing, but things like the Graham Creek, Carp River, Jock River rehab projects, is there a timetable to have that done, or is this just we're going to go and take another 100 yards of stream?
Each Chair, through you to the councillor, each of these initiatives has those particular rehabilitation projects have their own timeline and activity over which they'll be completed. I can share with you what those are. I don't have them right here in front of me, but each of them has a capital plan and project delivery schedule.
I think staff are to be lauded for the effort to try to tackle something this large. On the scale is enough to make you wonder what little pieces of it you can get done and what step you take first and so on. So I thank you for the report.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Certainly agree with your comments about staff taking large bites out of a large project. And what we found when we started going over the first phase of the strategy was that we need to get our own house in order as well. There's a lot of things the city was doing and other departments were working on together, but we certainly are unlimitedly blessed in Ottawa with the number of other agencies that work on water. So next, Councillor Holmes.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just some questions. On page 4, for example, the approach, where you're talking about the approach, phase 1, that phase 1 is a backgrounder on the issues facing the watersheds, which I understand. We're getting all the information of what we do now and our situation now. And the next paragraph, where this work will inform both the city's immediate actions. So this report, which talks about what we're doing at the moment and the situation that we have before us, is going to inform immediate actions in this year? Is that correct?
Certainly in terms of, as an example, our work with conservation authorities and things like that, if we're identifying areas or opportunities for improvement through better delegation of roles and responsibilities and activities. Certainly, yes, it would be our intent to implement those immediately and take advantage of those efficiencies and gains.
So what do you mean by that? Better roles
If, for
and
instance,
responsibilities?
Chair, through you, if, for instance, there was areas where we were doing similar activities or things of that nature, if we were doing things that overlapped and we weren't feeling that through this process we're determining that and we come to the conclusion about really the two groups don't need to be involved in the same activity, that there are efficiencies to be had by making sure that one group understands and takes the lead, if not the entire responsibility, then the other can reallocate their resources to other activities to move the entire program forward.
So you would expect to be picking up more work? Is that what the outcome would be?
Not necessarily. I think if there's an opportunity to realize that there are other groups that are working in the same field, then we can reduce work. Well, then so much the better. We don't. I think what we're trying to do is make sure that we're taking best advantage of the city's investments in these areas and making sure that there are no overlaps and duplication of services and repointing where, if those are discovered, repointing those activities to move the entire strategy further or in water environment programs further by moving out of one area and allowing someone else to take the lead and moving further ahead in another area.
So you're looking at trying to reduce the level of work?
No, clearly I'm not. I'm trying to make sure that we are moving as far forward as we can by finding efficiencies within the program and finding opportunities that perhaps two groups may not need to be involved in the same initiative. There may be an opportunity to, reach agreement with that group. Let's, for instance, suggest a conservation authority. You're going to move forward in this. We don't need to participate. We're going to redirect our resources in another area. And I think the gain of that is that we actually move forward in the overall complex of protecting the water environment by finding those efficiencies and avoiding that duplication.
Okay, another question is, it's good to know that we share the Ottawa River with Quebec. That's been ongoing for the last 150 years or so. How are our relations with Quebec? Like, who's your counterpart, and how often do you meet, and what do you talk about, and how's all that going?
Chair, through you to the councillor, we don't meet very regularly. I haven't met with the city of Gatineau in perhaps 2 years. I know that we are on the drinking water field. We're hosting meetings between our drinking water staff and their drinking water staff this spring. And I think it's our intent that we'll have to more frequently engage with the Ville de Gatineau and the Quebec group to better understand their efforts in this area.
You talk about the provincial policy statement that is fairly new, that talks about green infrastructure and climate change lens. So how are you sort of redirecting work within the department to meet that new provincial policy statement?
Chair, through you to the councillor, as you know, we are committed to coming forward with an air quality climate change update in Q2 of this year. And so we're tracking to bring that forward to committee and council, and that's will ensure that those activities and those considerations are brought to bear on many of the either the soft or the hard infrastructure that's being proposed.
I'm really interested in the integrated asset management piece that you're looking at. I gather we don't have anybody on staff who has done that work or who is experienced. It's generally coming out of Northern Europe, where they do have a lot of work having been done on that. So for example, are you going to cost out the value of the Ottawa River to us? Is that what you're talking about?
Chair, through you to the councillor, I don't think that that's the initiative that we would be heading to. I think it is to try to bring to the softer infrastructure the same rigor that we're currently applying on the hard infrastructure and using that to developing our plans. And I think, as you've mentioned, this is a bit of a novel or a new way of thinking, and I think we're very interested in learning from other municipalities or other jurisdictions that may be further advanced in understanding that, and certainly Europe would be one of those areas that we would look to.
Well, you're talking about studies in Guelph, Vancouver, Philadelphia, and Portland that found that green infrastructure that captures rainwater at source is more cost-effective than the conventional stormwater practices. So I've talked about that for a long time, gotten nowhere. The department has not been interested in looking at capturing rainwater at source. So we are now seeing other cities doing that, doing the studies. Are you thinking of moving forward with the study about that?
Chair, through you to the councillor, I think the department has and is very interested in trying to deal with stormwater at source. I think we are either leading or supporting programs in other departments as they move forward with the development of green infrastructure. We're very much interested in this, and if I've left you with the impression that we aren't, I wish to apologize. The city is very interested in moving forward with green infrastructure as part of the overall program. I don't characterize it as an either-or situation. It is another opportunity, another tool to be used in order to minimize the impact of, for instance, stormwater on our natural environment. So yes, we are very interested in implementing and will continue to support programs and initiatives, be they in some of the other departments, but we are continuing to support that.
Well, I'm involved in several community design plans at the moment, some with intended complete streets, wanting to plant far more trees, take up some of the asphalt. So are you involved in those studies to bring forward the Water Department's viewpoint about the philosophy of complete streets?
Chair, through you to the councillor, some of the information that you're speaking there are being led by others, for instance, Public Works on some of those initiatives, others by Planning and Growth Management. Where there has been a lead already established, we simply are monitoring that progress and those initiatives to see how they're being implemented and, where possible, offering encouragement for their implementations. So again, this is all part of trying to be aware of where other departments are and where other initiatives are in order to make best use of ratepayers' money.
Well, I must say I was looking forward to this water environment strategy and quite disappointed that nothing seems to be happening in 2014 that isn't already on the books and already happening through other departments. I thought we might get some discussion about bottled water. I thought we might get more water fountains, for example, fountains in parks. And just for fun, I've been going to community centers like Saint Laurent. You walk in the door and there's this enormous red glowing machine selling Coke. Because the Recreation Department has sold our pouring rights to Coca-Cola for all our buildings. Health is not very happy about that because Coke has no nutrition and it is valueless from a children's and adults' health point of view. But there we are with this fabulous glowing machine that's enormous, and the water fountain is tucked away down the corridor in the dark that you can hardly find. So we are putting in more water fountains, but my goodness, you can't find them. So I'd hope we might hear a little bit of discussion in here about promoting our own water, having our own, whether we're selling our own bottled water, but much more promotion about how safe and healthy our water is compared to all that bottled water. And it's a landfill problem. So, you know, I just don't see much in here that is action-oriented for 2014. So you're telling me in 2015 we'll see a report that talks about some actions?
Chair, through you, in terms of the water environment strategy, that's the case that we will be bringing forth for that term of council's consideration, a number of longer-range steps that would be theirs to consider as to their support as part of the ongoing activities of the water environment strategy. At this point, our focus is on delivering those services within our 2014 allotment and our capacity and capability.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holmes. I wonder, Mr. Kanalakis, if you can just comment on the fact that other departments, not just ESD, but Public Works, for example, are advancing the installation of more drinking water fountains. We'll see fountains in parks and things like that as part of the approved 2014 budget, and that any decisions for 2015, one term of council can't bind another term of council. We know that, but that your department, with the many different general managers that you have, will be looking at some of these ideas that Councillor Holmes just mentioned.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, you did say we are. It's obviously, certainly for Councillor that just spoke, probably not fast enough, but there is efforts happening on multiple levels to do this. The sponsorship and advertising and the contract for the pouring rights was something that we brought forward, and there's limitations in terms of trying to balance revenue targets that Council has set with what we have in our facilities. And I understand Public Health's position. I've had discussions with Dr. Levy about this, and we have tried to make some adjustments with the vendor on this part. But the rest of it, all the departments have work plans. There are initiatives, hundreds of them, related to the Council strategic plan that was approved in 2010. I'm happy to report, and you've seen it, that other than a couple of initiatives which we're moving on this year, pretty well every action item that we've said we were going to do as part of the Council-approved plan, which was funded, supported, and resourced, is actually going to be achieved this term of Council. There's very few things that won't be achieved. So we have a very successful record on all fronts, and on the environment front. When you saw I believe it was the last committee meeting where we brought forward the report on the achievements of the Environment Committee and Environment Department in terms of what we committed to doing this year. We pretty well have met all our commitments, other than a few which we're wrapping up now. And for this one, our view is that basically what Councillor Clark said, it's a very complex area. It's huge. There's lots of factors that we have to take into account to do it, and we're proceeding in a way that we're going to maximize where our resources and our priorities should be as a city versus the other stewards that are responsible for water in this community. And I think we have to balance that. And my view, and speaking with Dixon Weir, the general manager, is that I certainly do not want to be the sole owner and responsibility of this entire strategy when there's other players in the field that have a huge responsibility, and I think we have to be clear about what those things are, just like we do with many other cross-jurisdictional and intergovernmental issues that we deal with here at the city. It takes longer, but I think the product will be better in the end for everybody involved.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kanalakis. Just realized that we have one delegation here today, so I'm going to ask Mr. Graham Saul from Ecology Ottawa to come down and give his 5-minute presentation. I apologize, Mr. Saul. You were on the to-do list, and I went directly to councillors. It's not your fault, councillor. It's okay.
Thanks very much. My name is Graham Saul. I'm the Executive Director of Ecology Ottawa. So first of all, I want to recognize and make clear that Ecology Ottawa is very supportive of the work the city has done around the sewage issue. We ourselves have collected over 10,000 signatures on a petition calling on the federal and provincial government to support the City of Ottawa's plan to stop the dumping of sewage into the Ottawa River and its infrastructure financing needs. And we acknowledge and recognize the progress that's being made in that and the degree to which the city is consistently prioritizing it. We're also very glad to see momentum beginning to build around the water environment strategy. We support the roundtable idea. I think it's served well within the context of the kicking off the climate change strategy. We are conscious, however, that it was in 2010, within the context of the Ottawa River Action Plan, that the City of Ottawa committed to developing the water environment strategy, and at that stage it said it would essentially begin and end that process within the course of about 2 years. And now the city is proposing not only to not finish the strategy over the course of this term of council, but in fact to punt that responsibility into the next term of council. And so we're very disappointed to see that the city was unable to meet that obligation and is now suggesting that it will be met 3 years behind schedule. We hope it will, in fact, that this does represent the beginning of the process in terms of building political momentum, and that it will, in fact, follow through on this most recent commitment. We do think the river and the watershed work and the work the city is doing can be a good news story. We very much like to think that this is something that communities across the city can rally together around, and I think the support for the sewage work is broad. We've got a few requests. One would be that in addition to the work plan that the city provided, I think it was useful to identify the various different things the city plans to do in 2014. It would be good to know when they plan to do those things, given the fact that we have been missing, I think, deadlines around the water environment strategy, and I think this is a good faith suggestion that they have a strong work plan for 2014, so some indication of when those items will be done would be good. We support the Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee motion, and we specifically support the idea of reporting back on the outcome of the roundtable and reporting back on progress towards this work plan, and maybe a timeline could be identified for when that reporting back is going to happen. I think that there's a sense among many people who participated in the climate change roundtable that it's gone into a black hole, and I think that's a misunderstanding on the part of many people outside the city, because I believe there is progress happening on the climate change strategy inside the city, but there's really been no feedback process of any substance. So people are starting to get a little bit cynical about it. I've also noticed that there's no deadline for when in 2015 the water environment strategy will be presented to council, and that will be important. That's important potential progress as well. Finally, I very much support the suggestion earlier on that the green infrastructure dimension does represent an innovative set of best practices that the city should be embracing. Sunnyside and Stewart are good starts. Look forward to seeing those pilot projects unfold, and perhaps the city could identify other opportunities to move forward in 2014 with green infrastructure and pilot projects around streetscapes rather than wait for the 2015 water environment strategy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saul. Appreciate your delegation. Okay, I see no questions from committee members. We'll go next. And again, I apologize, Councillor Hubley. You had the floor next, but we had missed our delegation. So, Councillor Hubley, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. A couple of questions for Mr. Weir. The Councillor Holmes mentioned about the need for more water fountains, and I, for one, want to see more splash pads in parks. We learned recently, and I believe I put an inquiry in at the last council meeting with respect to this, we learned recently that your department put requirements on these splash pads that in some cases put the cost up 4 times or 400% cost increase. I'm wondering if the same changes apply to fountains, and will council be consulted at some point with these new requirements?
Chair, through you to the councillor on the issue of the splash pads. Yes, we are aware of your and have received your formal inquiry on the splash pads, and we are in the process of preparing a response back to you that will go through that in a step-by-step basis. In terms of the discharges from fountains, I think that's obviously regulatory compliance is a fundamental concept for all of these, and any fountains that would be installed would have to meet similar regulatory compliance criteria that, as would splash pads, as would any discharge to the environment.
And then moving on to this motion before us, any idea what the added cost to your exercise would be if we were to support this motion?
Councillor, there's one thing. Mr. O'Connor was going to weigh in on the motion at the time of the debate, but I can ask him to come up if you want, because he doesn't have a mic in front of him. The Environmental Advisory Committee was very deliberate in using the word consider. They did not expect staff or this committee or council to give that direction, and one of the considerations was being fiscally prudent. So I'm going to ask Mr. O'Connor, with the blessing of committee, to weigh on this motion now, because you've raised it. But again, this is something that will come up later if members want to debate it later. So Mr. O'Connor, did you want to comment on the word consider, and also provide feedback to Councillor Hubley about the possible financial impact of that motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. Beginning with the last point, I've spoken with the General Manager in his office directly. There's no financial impact to this. They were already doing this after meeting with the ESAC group, so they were very pleased to do so. They were encouraged by the Chair and by Councillor Chernyshenko moving it to formalize this motion into this committee report and on to Council. With regards to the word consider, again, that was a very deliberate word and was good to use because staff were going to consider all of those matters in this process. So no additional costs, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you very much.
That's it, Councillor? You're good? Okay, thank you. Councillor Chernyshenko.
Yes, thank you very much. There was already some discussion about sort of efficiencies, not having duplication in different groups who are working on something similar. I suppose I want to highlight the very valuable role and good work that I've seen the conservation authorities do. I am one of two councillors sitting on the board of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. There are, of course, two others, and that's a specific one where I would, I suppose, ask the question. I would assume the answer is going to be yes to, are you aware of all of the work that the conservation authorities do, but more importantly, how closely do city staff work with conservation authorities so that we know what they do, we know what their expertise is, so we can actually identify those areas where we might say, hey, they've got people who do that really well, let's let them carry that ball, or, you know, this is an issue that we should be dealing with.
Chair, through you to the councillor. In answer to your first question, we work very closely with the conservation authorities. And we are very knowledgeable about their areas of expertise and their programs. But that being said, there is an opportunity to take better advantage through closer ties. And I think one of the things that we've come to realize at a more practical level is that there are very many departments having very many discussions with the conservation authorities on very different aspects. And I think one of the things, as the Chair has pointed out, in terms of getting ourselves, improving our overall program delivery, is coordinating amongst the Public Works, the Planning and Growth Management, and the General Managers of the conservation authorities, so that there is a more consolidated, a more integrated approach to program and service delivery, and that we have a better overall understanding, rather than Planning and Growth Management dealing with the conservation authorities at one level and on some initiatives, environmental services on another, and Public Works on a third. So I think there is a gain to be had through closer coordination and better knowledge and sharing amongst the various city departments and the conservation authorities. And through that, we can identify some opportunities to either avoid duplication or identify some gaps into which perhaps city programs might be able to fit, or conversely, conservation authorities may be better able to deal with it.
And I'm going to jump in here, Councillor Chernyshenko. One thing that will happen this year, and Councillor Moffat and I have directed staff to do this, not just as part of the strategy, but it will be enshrined in the strategy, and that is we're going to get all members of staff that have any relevance within water, so not just ESD, but all departments. We're going to ask them to meet soon with all of our City Council reps who are on the different conservation authorities to make sure that there's a good flow of information back and forth. One of the complaints that I've actually heard from a member of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority is that there doesn't seem to be enough advocacy at the authority on behalf of the City of Ottawa, that some of the city's own appointed reps are actually voting against City of Ottawa initiatives. So we're going to, and not council reps, sorry, to clarify that while you're here. And I sat in that for 7 years. So one of the concerns Councillor Moffat and I had was that if our reps from council don't go to these meetings briefed with the latest and most up-to-date information that could be useful at the Conservation Authority, we're missing out on a very important flow of information, especially with regards to members of council who are actually providing a governance role to the authority, good for conversation during budget time and things like that. So you will see not just staff discussing this with the authorities, with their level of staff. We're actually going to get our staff to talk to our council reps to make sure that when you go to those meetings, you've got as much information that's relevant to whatever the authority is dealing with their work plan that year. The floor is still yours, Councillor.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much, both knowing that and the fact that that initiative is being taken, because, I mean, for one, there are two council appointees on that board at the moment. It's myself and Councillor Moffat, was Councillor DeRoche until recently. On no occasion did I receive a briefing. You know, you're off next month to this RVCA meeting, and staff would like you to know this, take this information with you as you do your decision making, and kind of go, I don't want to say go blind, but I certainly don't go there with any sort of a sense of briefing as to what's happening here at the city. So that's good to hear, because it's certainly my sense that there would be opportunities where, even though through our rates we are already the major contributor to the RVCA, as an example, that if we find cases where $10,000 or $20,000 of city money to go to one of the authorities in an area where they've got expertise, we might triple or quadruple the value of that money, because they already have the staff person, they already have the study, they already are doing monitoring, etc. I'm sort of seeing as nodding, I suppose, to what isn't really a question, but should have been. So we keep doing more of that, I guess.
Yes, I think, Chair, through you to the Councillor, I think aligning ourselves very closely with the Conservation Authority can do nothing but improve our level of service between the two groups and find efficiencies for both groups to avoid duplication. And I think the other piece is identify gaps and address gaps.
Because just here, if we look under the mandate of the conservation authorities and the work they do, this talk of green infrastructure and valuing the work, you know, what could be a better example than flood control, nutrients being prevented from not finding their way into the Rideau River, etc. The list could go on. That's all pollution prevention, if you will, front of pipe, not end of pipe approach that those authorities take, and is the most efficient way to do it. And just finally, a point of question on, there was the brief bullet point about the Sunnyside and Stewart green streets initiatives, and I had to clarify for Councillor Hume next to me that no, Sunnyside and Stewart do not actually run together now. There is no intersection. There is a Sunnyside. He knew that, but that's why he was puzzled. There is a Sunnyside initiative and a Stewart one. Of course, Sunnyside is in my ward, and we're pleased to see that, albeit over just a couple of blocks, we are now looking at how rainwater can be retained, slowed down, to some degree purified before it finds its way into pipes and ultimately into the river. How closely that's, I understand it, mostly a public works initiative. I guess it's very much a joint initiative. How closely are you already working together to monitor the results of that, so that we know if it's useful to replicate a year or two from now or after it's up and running?
Chair, through you to the Councillor, that's an initiative currently being led as it approaches construction with our infrastructure services group, more so, and we will be establishing with them some monitoring programs to see how effective that can be.
All right. Well, I'm glad to see it, and just so others know, it's been extremely well received. We've had 3 public meetings now, and the one and only objection from all 3 public meetings has been someone who doesn't want the bus stop relocated from in front of their house, since that's where one of these pieces is going to go in. So it's good to know that the public response has been very positive. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chernushenko. Just to clarify as well, part of the expectation of staff is that even though those 2 streets are marked as pilot projects and we're starting them, that we would hope that those would become part of the way the city does business in the future, so they're not just pilots. One thing that Leanne Snedden's group is going to do out in the East End, in a community that doesn't have proper stormwater management, is actually speak about doing more of this type of landscaping, not just on city boulevards, city sidewalks, but encouraging residents to do more of that on their properties as well, to try and diminish the amount of water that flows from a property into the drain, which we know even in itself costs more money. Every time you run water through a drain it's putting impact in terms of life cycle. So we'll try and do more of that as well. Conseiller Fleury.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. I'll start by jumping on to what Councillor Shunashenko was saying about the pilot projects. I think those are very, very important things, very important projects, and I guess the community is really excited about them and also wants them to be properly thought through and properly funded. So I wonder if on that you could say a bit around the progress of those files and where we're at in terms of actually implementing the two specific projects.
Chair, through you to the councillor, I will speak. I don't have that information as to when those construction projects will proceed. I will speak with Infrastructure Services and get that information to you.
I've personally received good updates on those files. I'm wondering sometimes, from which pocket, from which envelope, or which department the funding's coming from, and if we're getting if we're getting as much out of the project as we can. At this point, I'm not worried, but I want to make sure that they're well implemented to demonstrate how good of examples they can be and how we can leverage those into other opportunities elsewhere in the city. I'll echo some of the comments of my colleagues about making sure that yes, we have a lot of water in Ottawa. Yes, it's important for recreational purposes and for drinking water purposes. I think we have a very good track record in terms of drinking water, and that's reassuring for everyone around the table and residents. I do think that we need to find better or stronger partnerships and stronger language to share with residents that might not understand how clean our drink and how good our drinking water is, to make sure that there's more of an aggressive strategy to make sure that people are aware, because I see it amongst my network of friends and family and people that still are with the still are uncomfortable with the drinking water, and I don't know why. It shouldn't be there, but we really have to make that change. In terms of recreational use, in the work plan, it's unclear to me. Maybe it's in the 2015 piece when we do have a better traction of the issue and the action plan component. But I wonder yes, there is the recreational element to it, but there's more that is outside of our control, like the Chalk River nuclear power plant, or different farm or pulp. J'ai juste le terme en français, je suis désolé. L'usine de pulpe et de papier qui sont en aval de nous. I'm wondering if the strategies, you were talking about partnerships before, I'm wondering how those are factored. And I'll give you the recreational example that often is neglected in my mind is geeses. Right? So when you go to our beaches, when you run along our pathways, the geeses are part of that ecosystem and have an impact on the recreational use of the water, but also on the quality of the water. So I'd like maybe to hear on that and where it fits in the work plan.
Chair, through you to the councillor, yes, a lot of focus and attention has been made on the water aspect of things like Petrie Island and Mooney's Bay and things like that. But you're absolutely right that the local fauna or the local geese do have a very significant impact on water quality, and that's why we very closely, especially during the recreational season, we work very closely with public health and with public works, who are tasked with the management of those sites. Doing things like simple housekeeping things can have a very significant impact on that. Things like ensuring litter are collected and disposed of on a regular basis to reduce the attraction of geese and gulls and things like that. Those can be a very important aspect of maintaining and improving water quality. So we work very closely with those groups in that regard. And it certainly, in terms of we will continue to do so, and where opportunities exist, we would certainly, Public Works is most keen on advancing that to reduce the negative contribution of the geese on water quality. So, those steps, we work very closely with all of those groups to improve the recreational quality of Ottawa's water.
And then just to follow up on the delegation piece, there's obviously two phases to this program. The second phase, speaking of really the action plan components. If I'd taken notes reading the piece, and it talked about recognizing the action plan, coordination, and a strategic framework, and for the phase two, and for us to get there and to get there on time, I think the delegation does bring some very relevant points of making sure that we keep on tab. What's the mechanism for us to be updated on each item? Have we set criteria for timelines, and are you planning to come back to either the advisory committee or environment committee to update us on the progress?
Chair, through you to the councillor, at this point, the idea of feedback is a good one, and we would be supportive of it. The timing of that, not exactly sure. We haven't sort of nailed that down, but as we go forward, certainly within the 2015-2018 aspect of that, we would, I think that's important input, and we would include that in the development of that strategy, especially when it comes to the identification of various actions. I think that would be a very smart approach, and perhaps reporting out may be a part of that whole water environment strategy piece. That we would consider as part of the 2015-18. Much as we do the Ottawa River Action Plan, we have an annual report on progress, and I think this may be a similar situation. But I think all very good input.
So I'm wondering, based on your comfort to have clear timelines and set goals and have a reporting mechanism, if that be a direction to staff to make sure that I want to make sure that, especially in 2014, that the work plan is completed on time, so that we can really move into the second phase in the targeted timelines.
I think that Mr. Kanalakis can jump in to answer that also. Councillor Fleury, my expectation, and I think that DCM would be, if this committee adopts this strategy and approves not just the current work plan, which we de facto approved as part of our budget process, our expectation as a council that staff are going to do what they say they're going to do, and we definitely will check in. So maybe Mr. Kanalakis wants to provide that assurance that what is in the work plan on behalf of the departments he actually has control of, and we can certainly speak with Nancy Shepherd's, the other DCM, that staff are going to deliver, and I think Councillor Clark said it right at the beginning. This is a very ambitious, big thing to do. We don't want to get to the point where staff are being tasked to do more than is within their resources this year, which is why it's very important for the next term of council to have those documents in front of them that maps out a strategy for the full 4 years and puts money attached to it, because these things aren't cheap and they're not free. So, Mr. Kanalakis.
Chair, that's right. As we pull apart what the various responsibilities are and we put together the plan that relates to the city in terms of our components, we'll overlay that in terms of what the other organizations are doing, and we'll put a work plan with dates on it that we'll be monitoring as we have all our other major projects that we undertake as part of the corporate strategic plan. Council will be entering a phase early in 2015, the new council, looking at the next term of council strategic plan. This, because of the actions I'm supposing will happen today in terms of adopting this, will fit into that as one of the initiatives under one of the strategic priorities, and that will have a timeline associated to it that gets monitored then by the Senior Management Committee and the Executive Committee of the organization, and gets reported back to committee and council on an annual basis during the term. So that will all come together as we sort out what work has to be done, who's doing it, when does it have to be done, and then it fits into the strategic planning, monitoring process, performance measures, all the other things that we have in place this last term of council that will continue into the next term.
If I can add to that, Conseil Fleury, there's three more elements, and I appreciate Mr. Kanalakis' feedback, and that is the next term of council is going to have to determine what the tax rate's going to be. And during the budget debate is the absolute opportune time to have this debate, especially the very first year of the new term of council, as to what the strategic initiatives are going to be. As Mr. Kanalakis said, those initiatives will get set, and then it's up to staff to complete them during the term of council. If they can't, then they have to come back to us and tell us why. But that's the opportune time to have the debate and say, do we want to spend a lot more money on water and maybe less money in another department, or do we want to increase taxation to actually do more? So the budget has to be done within the fullness of the, or the water budget would have to be done in the fullness of the whole bigger City of Ottawa budget. And certainly it's an opportunity to go out to the community and ask them what their priorities are. And that's the third piece of it. So the Water Roundtable will help populate people's ideas and give us hopefully a shopping list of here's what we'd like to do, here's the nice to have, or here's what's not feasible. Or maybe we find out when Mr. Weir goes out to speak to the other agencies that there's a whole bunch of things that other people are already doing. So we can take money out of that pile, that we're not going to duplicate that service and put that exact amount of money into something else. So we're looking for synergies as well. And I wanted to clarify earlier, Mr. Weir, you were speaking about Gatineau and you made it sound as though we weren't having a lot of communication with them, but we actually are. One of the elements you're working with is the CSOs, but the mayor also has spoken to the new mayor of Gatineau, and certainly I know when you develop the phase one of this strategy, one of the comments that you had made was that given that there's no conservation authority that oversees the Ottawa River per se, like it does the other rivers and streams in Ottawa, that we certainly need to work more closely with the bureaucracy and also the political level. So I wanted to clarify that at this point, because Councillor Fleury, a big piece of this also is going to be looking at what the other jurisdictions have to offer, especially with regards to the Ottawa River.
That's good to hear, and I'm not concerned with the 2015 piece. I'm just making sure that so for 2014 it's clear that the items are funded and that they will be actioned, and that from what I hear, stronger partnerships and no duplication amongst the partners in that same sector. That's a yes?
Absolutely, Councillor Fleury, and quite frankly, why this strategy was developed into two phases was staff wanted to make sure that every single item in the 2014 work plan was funded and that they wouldn't have to come back and reopen the budget debate either by asking for new money or taking money from another department or file to shift from something that they were already working on to do more within the water strategy. And the other thing that Mr. Weir and staff have cautioned us on as well is putting a work plan out there that's just simply not feasible within the time frame that they want to get it done in, because these projects sometimes take time. And a good example is the Southeastern watershed. We've been working on that for 2 years. We will wrap that up this year. I expect a memo to come out sometime this month, maybe early April, about where we're at. But we've had consultants working on that project for 2 years, and it will wrap up this year. So it takes a long time to get the data and do the modeling and things like that. So I'm convinced that our staff will deliver what they said they're going to deliver. Thank you. Councillor Derache.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a general comment, and then I want to ask a few questions that flow from Councillor Chernachenko's motion. I like what I see with the strategy. I think it brings together a long list of activities that we're doing. I think it's realistic. I think it's based on the reality, as the conversation just explored, that we have limited resources, and I think it focuses on what we are actually able to achieve. Because I don't want to have a feel-good strategy. I want to have a strategy that actually is going to have some real and tangible impact. And I don't want a strategy that, again, we're frustrated with the federal government or the provincial government, so we're going to, we're going to put everything on the City of Ottawa to to achieve, when realistically we know that we have a limited scope in terms of where we and how we operate. So I think this strategy does that. Years ago, last term, we used to publish a little green booklet that really took all the activities across the City of Ottawa, transit, planning, and when you looked at it with that very macro and global perspective at the city, we're actually doing a lot when it comes to the environment. And I'm always surprised to come to this committee and hear, well, we're not doing enough, you're not doing anything, you should study this and study that. The residents, I don't think, want studies. They want us to take action. And I think this report here is showing that we intend to do that, and you've confirmed that you are well on your way. I do have some concerns with some of the points here that are in the motion. I appreciate that it's consider, but when I tell my children, we'll see, they usually interpret that to mean yes. So I don't want to say we'll see if I'm not really under the impression that it's a priority for us. So the first point is some form of ongoing consultation. I think we've committed to do that. I think we've had a record of doing that. It's not just stakeholders and special interest groups. We talk to residents as well in that strategy, okay? And I think we're doing a good job on that because I certainly hear that from residents. Metrics be developed to monitor the progress of the strategy. I think we should have that. I don't think we need to hire a consultant at $50,000 to pull together some complicated metrics, because at the end of the day, we get a lot of water that comes from upstream that we really have no role in influencing. So the river systems are part of a watershed that aren't all within the boundaries of the City of Ottawa. So if we're going to do some metrics, let's do some metrics on the things that we're doing and that we have some control on. The Ottawa River included in a strategy, I mean, we've certainly talked about that. The mayor has said that's a priority, so I don't have a problem with that. Water usage and demand management, including conservation and water rate structure, be considered. I don't know what that means. But if it means that let's have this much larger conservation strategy, because in California, they don't have enough water. Therefore, they need to conserve, so we should do that as well and feel good about it, even though we've got a lot of water. We saw this summer, Madam Chair, where I think we got into some mixed messaging with the public when it came to drought situations in other jurisdictions, that they felt that they had to cut back here when really we had an ample water supply. And we saw that in the numbers this year. You have a deficit, Mr. Weir, and I think that is in part from sometimes we get into this mixed messaging that because California, because another jurisdiction needs to conserve, we need to as well. So I do have concerns with that because I think we need to have a much clearer communication strategy. A climate change lens, I'm sorry, I read the report. I think you are doing that in the sense that there are some extreme weather conditions. So thank you very much for the advice. Staff are doing that. Recognition of the new impacts of new infrastructure, for example, roads, of course roads. You might as well include transit in that because they have an impact in the environment. If we're building a park and ride, we're building a new piece of the transitway, we're building a new LRT extension. I don't know if the committee knows this advisory committee, but we spend tens of millions of dollars a year in environmental assessments. We're doing an O-Train extension study. Even though we've already done an environmental assessment, we have to do another environmental assessment. That's just the way it works around here, but I think maybe the committee needs to understand that we're probably already well on that path, and we certainly do consider the environment. In fact, many new infrastructure programs that we implement have a net improvement to the environment. When you think of stormwater management, when you have old farmers' fields that are, gushing water into the river, oftentimes when we're urbanizing that, we bring in a much better stormwater system that actually improves the environment. And the last one I don't have a problem with in terms of the presentation of the results, and I think you're going to do that. So I appreciate its consider. A couple there, I think, I do have concerns with respect to water usage and demand management. I don't know what that means. I think it's code for, raise the rates and, make sure we don't, make sure we guilt people into not using water. I don't support that. And, number 6, in terms of new infrastructure, I mean, that just, to me, is, I think, ignorant to what we're already doing, I think, when it comes to the long list environmental assessments that happen and are ongoing at this time. So I'll probably dissent on a couple there. Otherwise, I will support it, Madam Chair, which is fair, okay? I don't think I have to, some of them are good ideas and I'll support them, but some of them I just think I need to understand more, so I'll dissent. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Councillor Darache, and certainly throughout the development of the strategy, whether it's phase 1 or 2, there's a significant amount of work that staff are doing that has been mentioned in that motion. And one thing that the advisory committee was very firm in saying was their desire to see the broader community consulted, especially as part of the Water Roundtable. And when you look at the statistics that we provided today, 77% of all of Ottawa's water, so the City of Ottawa, not the corporation, is in the rural areas. And that's one thing we want to see is great rural participation from our residents, not just the lobby groups, as you yourself mentioned. So next, Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm with Councillor DeRoche on the redundancy of some of this stuff, but I would be a little concerned that the ESAC is setting itself up as the Environment Committee, and I, to some extent, understand that they need to have information if they're going to give advice, but I think it's important to understand that the absolute responsibility for reporting to Council is through the Environment Committee. And having said that, we did talk about the broader strokes earlier. Some of the stuff has been raised by Councillor Hubley, for example, about the provincial, as I understand it, legislation forcing us to put sanitary sewage hookups on splash pads and vastly increasing the cost depending on where the source of the water and sanitary outlet is. I've had that experience already. I didn't challenge it, but it's important to understand that if the province is going to start mandating certain things, the province better start writing checks. The other things that I noted, back in the day, road ditches were considered fish habitat only because of the revenue implications for the provincial government. And it seems to me that the fish habitat argument needs to be better defined. At one point, I thought we had the RVCA taking some oversight responsibilities for the Ottawa River on behalf of the region. It's history. You may want to check that out, David. I'd also like to point out that putting it on staff, here, read the Conservation Authority agenda and brief me. Well, if you need briefing, ask for it. I'm sure they'll provide it. I've never had any problem getting staff to bring things to me, and the implied criticism I didn't think was appropriate. It's just my view of the world. The other thing is, you should note, on page 15, I think it is, the assessment calculation. Based on total assessment, the budgets of the conservation authorities are struck. And I can tell you right now that a vast majority of the funds the conservation authorities are spending are city funds. The degree to which we oversee their actual spending is negligible. And I'm not going to suggest we start to audit them. They already have some external audit, but I can tell you right now there is no supervision of the amount of money and how it's spent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark. Just want to add, when Councillor Moffat and I spoke with staff about this strategy, Councillor Moffat, who is on the Conservation Authority at Rideau Valley, certainly raised the issue of the fact that in Rideau Valley, the City of Ottawa is the single largest contributor to their budget, and the concern was that when our council reps went, that they went forward with as much information as possible. So we're looking to increase communication, not just external to the city, but also within the city. Councillor Chernushenko.
Yes, and that was certainly the gist or intent of my comments, as opposed to pointing out failings of staff or weaknesses, rather that the more, and it's not as if every time I go to the monthly meetings I would want a briefing, but rather as these issues come up, budget time, etc., other major decision points, that we look at the opportunity to brief both the councillors and the other Ottawa representatives, I think would benefit. Excuse me, gentlemen. To sum up then on this motion, the reason why I agreed to move
Sorry,
it.
Councillor, just give me 1 second. Hold your time. Are there any other councillors that want to ask questions before we go to debate on the motion? Okay, seeing none, do any other councillors want to weigh in before I give Councillor Chernushenko the last word on this report and this motion? Okay, seeing none, Councillor Chernushenko, the floor is all yours.
Right. And in fact, I'll thank you. I'll use that pause because there was one more thing I wanted to mention. Just as an example of on this bigger issue, on Saturday morning, a number of residents of Old Ottawa East, where the Oblate lands, St. Paul's University, Oblates and Sisters property is slated to undergo a major redevelopment in the next few years, and it looks like the developer is now conditionally has been selected and chosen. A workshop was held all of Saturday morning looking at how, essentially theme being a deep green redevelopment of that land, and water was such a key part of it. From the positive side of the history where water actually did, Patterson Creek prior to the canal being built actually crossed through and down that, across that land and out into the Rideau River, bringing some visible water flow back to the site, to the more defensive, if you will, developing in as soft a way as possible, capturing water to be used on the site, so as both to save money, reduce people's bills, save on infrastructure costs, and improve water quality. These were really big themes, and I was pleased that we had a number of city staff there who were involved in those discussions, contributing and listening from from the water side, from Public Works, from planning, and others. And it's the kind of thing that I would love to see done on any kind of major redevelopment. So to come back and conclude on this motion, I chose to support it, albeit with a few maybe imperfections. Above all, what I see the ESAC asking for is more information. We tend to get criticized more, whether as Environment Committee or as city government, when people don't know what we're doing and assume we're not doing anything. And whether it's on greenhouse gases, the work we are doing on light rail and any number of other initiatives that have enormous greenhouse gas reduction implications, but we may not have quantified those, may not have communicated where our plans are going. We'll get criticized for inaction because we haven't been able to demonstrate action. And I think what I see mostly here from ESAC is they're saying communicate with us and through us to the public. The more people see where we're going as a city, the more they were able to judge based on the facts as opposed to assumptions through lack of information. So a number of these initiatives really are about metrics, about reporting, about consultation, and I think that's all quite important. So I am glad to support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Chernushenko. First, I want to thank committee members and Councillor Clark for their excellent questions and comments, points of clarification. Councillor Hubley had to go to another meeting at 11 o'clock, but he did tell me that he was supportive of the staff recommendation for Phase 1 and 2, and this will come back to Council. But I also want to thank our staff for pulling this together. This was a lot of work to land where we are today. Again, not just several departments, but when you look at trying to straighten out the governance and who has which role in the nation's capital, and looking at how can we take a big bite out of what is a big project and provide deliverables, and how can we do it in a way that moves the yardstick forward, was very important in how they brought this together. So I want to thank not just Dixon Weir and the ESD staff, but certainly the staff in all the other departments, and that would include legal as well. There's a huge untangling sometimes when our staff say, we're going to go tell the Conservation Authority what we think they should do about this, and then staff have to come in and say, you can tell them, but they're an autonomous organization, so we have to find a different way of doing business. So I look forward to our staff working with the other levels of government throughout this year, getting together, finding out what is it that we're doing, what are they doing, are there synergies, are there places we can take leadership. Certainly appreciate, again, the role that council's chosen, environmental advisors have provided or what they provided to us, and it was a tremendous dialogue that we had that night when Councillor Moffat and I were out, and they've indicated that how active they want to play a role in the roundtable, and we certainly welcome them in that regard. In terms of the motion that you've moved on my behalf, Councillor Chernushenko, on behalf of the Environmental Advisory Stewardship Committee, certainly appreciate that. And although I agree with some of the comments that Councillor Darache made, certainly about the inclusiveness of our consultation process, that we're looking at our community broadly, from tip to tail, if you will, from Carp to Orleans and all parts of rural, that we certainly have a safeguard in this motion that we're asking staff to consider this. So it may be some ideas they're already doing, or there are already things that they can say, yes, we're already doing this, but definitely there's no budget impact this year, and then it will be up to the future term of council to determine how far it wants to take the next strategy. And as we know, with this term of council, we can take things pretty far, and it's a question of balancing priorities. So the priorities, again, need to be dealt with in the mix of how we run a very, very large city. And when you look at other municipalities and how they're running, I'm proud of our staff and what they do here at the City of Ottawa, and want to see us move the yardsticks forward. But again, we're trying to do other things in housing and arts and other areas, and it's that balancing act that the next term of council is going to be tasked with. So having said that, I'm now going to look for Councillor Chernushenko's motion. Is that motion approved with one dissent? Councillor DeRush?
It's point 4 and 6. Thank you.
Okay. So on Councillor Chernushenko's motion, is it carried with the dissent of Councillor Darash? Items 4 to 6? Carried. Okay. Thank you. On the Water Environment Strategy Phase 1, the Environment Committee recommend to Council 1 approve the Water Environment Strategy Phase 1 attached as Document 1 and receive the 2014 City of Ottawa Work Plan as attached as Document 2. Is that item carried and received? Carried and received. Thank you very much. Are there any notices of motion for consideration at subsequent meetings? No. Are there any inquiries? No, there's no other business other than to say that members of council will be getting a memo at some point with regards to the water roundtable. We're going to ask that you suggest the names of 10 community members who may want to attend the water roundtable so that we can get a good cross-section from the entire city, and hopefully we'll see a lot of residents that want to participate. And our next meeting is Tuesday, April the 15th. And having said that, thank you very much to our clerk's office staff and the other staff that support this meeting. We are now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.